Hi there, and welcome to my Mechanoid Cluster Defense Guide for Rimworld. I'm Icon, and this video will guide you through all you need to know to get rid of your local Mechanoid cluster. I'm going to talk about the general problems with these, I'm going to introduce a couple of strategies, and I'm going to explain you thoroughly what you need to pay attention to not get brutally destroyed by them. Because once you know their mechanics, they are still a royal pain in the rear because they are among the most dangerous threats the game has to offer, but they at least get more and more manageable. So let's get started, shall we? The Mechanoid Cluster event got introduced with a royalty DLC, and it sends down a couple of buildings on your map in form of drop pods, and sometimes they also come with a couple of mobile mechanoids. Mechanoid clusters are always compiled of a couple of defensive structures, a couple of utility structures, and last but not least a couple of threat makers or other unhappy things like mech assemblers, which just build mechanoids on your map, or a sun blocker, which just blocks out the sun on your map, or toxic spewers, which produce a toxic fallout on your map. The list is quite long and is closely linked to the negative events that can happen on your map, like think of temperature increases or decreases, think of psychic drones, and even mortar shells. So you have to take care of these buggers. When they land, they are always inactive. There are three types to wake up your mechanoid fellas. You can go for running straight into the proximity activator and get them awake. You can shoot at them, of course, or sometimes they also come with a countdown activator, which just gives them a certain amount of time. Proportion-wise, you see here I have smaller camps, and they can even come in large sizes like these, which is apocalyptic. You don't want to let that happen on your map, but sometimes you have to fight through that. The defense structures here are three different things. There's auto-charge turrets, which are basically armed with the Centipedes Charge Blaster. It's the same thing, just mounted on a turret. And if you check out the range, this is just disgusting. And especially worth mentioning here is it has a way higher range than the heavy charge blaster of the Centipede. If we check them out more closely, it is not exactly the same weapon, of course. It's a charge blaster. Let's check out the stats one more time because I want to make sure that you guys know what you're getting into. So the Centipedes Weapon has the same damage like this. Armor penetration and stats are exactly the same. This is just basically like a charge blaster centipede on a stick, and you have to deal with it accordingly. The range is really high, and that's true for all the mechanoid turrets. There's a third type of turret in the mechanoid array, but they sadly look like Inferno like charge turrets themselves. Oh no, here we are. And there's the Auto Inferno turret. Basically, it's just like the Centipede's Inferno gun, just with hell of a range. You have to deal with those. The easiest way of getting the job done is by applying mortar shells. My personal favorite is if I have the wealth. If you are a rich kid, just mortar shell them down. If you are not so much of a rich kid, there's another option you can use, and that's the smoke launcher strategy. I'm going to show you what I mean. Alright, in order to take down this cluster easily, I can only recommend smoke launchers. I can't recommend them enough, because there's one cool thing to know. While your people are standing in such a cloud of smoke, these turrets can't lock onto you. It's basically a foolproof way of getting yourself out of trouble with those. The thing here is just, it works best when the cluster is still sleeping. As you see here, we don't have any issues getting in range there. But the other thing is very important. You have to reapply that smoke constantly, and therefore it's really important that you keep an eye on how this is working out, because this can backfire horribly on you. So now we're going to unattack a couple of people, and then going to attack the Scyther first. Oh yeah, people hitting stuff on the ground. Alright, as you see here now, we are waking up the Mechanoids, but we're not. But the turrets are not able to engage on us, and that's absolutely what we want to. And as soon as the smoke cloud disperses, as you see here, the turret is instantaneously fighting against us again. So this is where this whole trick gets a little bit difficult. You have to monitor your launcher dude constantly, and at the same time it is quite a pain because you have a variance of shots hitting or not hitting. So just to know what you're getting into. But beyond that, as you see here, this fight is a lot less dangerous now that the Mechanoids can't really respond to our attacks. That's one option that you can take. All you need is a smoke launcher and according equipment with the right range. But that only works against clusters that have no... What do we have it here? That have no mech high shield or low shield enabled. Mech high shields intercept shells from mortars, and mech low shields intercept bullets. So this is really, really horrible. Whenever you run into a cluster that's protected by a mech low shield, they look quite similar like the mech high shields. Sadly, there's none spawned here. They kind of like slipped my attention, but that's not that important. You get the idea. So when you're encountering a low shield, mortar it. When you're encountering a high shield, you obviously can't mortar it, but there's also a solution which I can introduce. To properly break a mech high shield, there's the EMP shell and its friend. We're going to use this as an example. There's one thing that's really important to mention here, and that's the EMP shell can only break that shield so and so long. So you need to set a force target on that one. And we're going to hold our fire for now, because I want to wait until the others are ready to and have their marks as well. I'm going to try and aim for that shield if possible. And let's hold the fire here as well. Oops, wrong selection, sorry. And here we go. So the most important thing now is that we wait until this mortar has fired. This is not the right angle. Yeah. So here we go, set the target. And once the shell has been fired, we can stop holding our fire. Make sure that the line is aligned towards the correct place, and here we go. Now the EMP shell is flying, breaking the mech high shield, and as you see here, it has only a disarm radius of 0.4 hours, so you really have to time that thoroughly to make it happen. So we're going to hold our fire here one more time. And then we wait until the EMP shell is ready. And now we'll release. And as we see here, sometimes when you do that, I don't know why, but they love to swap targets. Please keep an eye out for that. I was really angry at times because of this happening, and it's really easy once you know it, but you need to know it. So as we see here, this is how you can take care of it. It takes quite some time, but it works a charm. So once your mortars are in synchronicity, it's usually not that much of a problem to just let it run. And, you know, it will take quite some time. When you want to go for strategies like these, keep in mind you should have you should really have a good armament of shells. And in general, to counteract high shields like these, the easiest the best way to do is to have as many mortars as possible. Overall, you can use the mortar strategy against all these clusters, of course. There's no limit to that, and they are, as a matter of fact, my favorite go-to strategy, because they might cost you ammunitions, but they are a very, very easy and secure way to deal with these. As we see here, the sunblocker is taking damage, but not the turrets. One thing that I want to mention about those turrets, they are highly explosive. Among other things in the clusters, there's also sometimes unstable power cells, which explode basically on contact. Once you drop down some ammunition on that, they go crazy on you. So once you destroy the threat maker building, the mechanoids, according to the cluster, will attack you. Sometimes they just attack you just like that. I have come to the conclusion that sometimes they really act very hard to understand, and sometimes they abandon their cluster, sometimes they don't. Most of the time I make the experience that they always abandon their cluster as soon as the major threat building is destroyed, or a majority of the buildings in general. God knows, no real good rule of engagement here. So here we go, taking down that thing. And of course, these are the most general ways of dealing with that. But there are also other methods that I can recommend you. So, of course, if things are too horrible for you, there's always rocket launchers. Rocket launchers are a easy way to deal with the situation, especially if you happen to have no smoke launcher, but rocket launchers. But as a matter of fact, I consider them only as a mediocre solution. Orbital bombardment targeters and power beam targeters and tornado generators are, of course, something you can use, but keep in mind, I personally consider that as a kind of a overkill solution, because most of the time you don't really need that. But if things get too hard for you, these are good choices. I personally like to have a power beam targeter or a bombardment targeter when I can get my hands on them and keep them somewhere stashed safe for that one apocalyptic mechanoid cluster, like this one here. So overall, when you want to deal with clusters that have a lot of mechanoids attached to them, make sure that you try to destroy their structures and lure them in some defense mechanism like that. This is a pretty crappy kill box, to be honest with you guys, but nevertheless it does one thing for me. It makes sure that we don't have to take care of the mechanoids out there, because there's nothing worse than mechanoids raiding you out there. Just believe me when I say it like that. So last but not least, I want to talk about two more methods that are really, really useful, and that's your comms console and alliances. You can call your direct allies for military support. This will cost you some goodwill and is only triggerable every now and then, but as we see here, we can deploy friendlies. And let's see what they're up to. They're immediately going ham on that. You can use these things in two different ways. You can either use them to just let them take care of the problem for you, as you see here. They're not dealing with it that horribly, or you use the attack of these dudes to get your own people behind that and do a joint forces attack, because that's actually a pretty strong thing to do. And oops, debug log, whatever. That's one thing that you can do. Just keep in mind that when you're choosing your alliances, the strength of the allies is always depending on the faction. So Outlanders are medium strength, the strongest are the Imperial troops, and well, Tribals, they are among the weakest forces there, but there's one good thing about Tribals, and that's the fact that they come with melee weapons, and melee weapons are surprisingly effective when it comes down to beating down centipedes and other very strong ranged mechanoids, because Melee is basically their biggest weakness to boot with. So as you see here, that worked out decently. There's one last thing that I can recommend you to, sorry, and that's being a noble is also pretty sick on its own. You can't just go for, where was it again? Go for the permits of the royal people. I wonder, wasn't there a menu point where I could look up all the permits somebody got? Sorry. Well, when you call aid, I have already unlocked the options that are most pleasing to me. You can go for aerodrone salvos or squads. I mean, as we see here, they need hostile visitors present, so it's a little bit of a thing that's quite annoying there, because you can't use them there. But aerodrone salvo is a thing that we can use, and royalty is among the worst solutions to deal with the problems, because basically I don't know why the system here doesn't accept that as a threat from the outside. So hostile visitors, but you know, I can't change that. This will be not kicking it, but I want to demonstrate what the aerodrone salvo strike can do for you. So this is not really enough to take down this big bad cluster, but for smaller clusters it can be really enough. Sadly, it doesn't work unless you're being raided. Then you can summon these guys nevertheless, because funny enough, let's show you that. Let's just execute a little raid. The Dark Rapiers are attacking us. Well, okay, hostile visitors are still not present. Okay. Not sure about this one, honestly, why it doesn't work. But as you see here, the aerodrone strike is an option you can pick up. But I personally value the summoning of military aid here a lot more. And now hostile visitors are present. So, guys, can you please wrap your head around what's going on here? So, overall, I'd recommend most the summoning of allies via the comms console. As you see here, the royalty system is kind of wonky in that regard. But whatever method you go for or not, there's always one thing that's true. Your best friend against mechanoids are EMP weapons, heavy armors, charge weapons, and solid-made kill boxes, because overall these are the best ways to deal with large amounts of mechanoids, no matter what. As we see here, the situation is not that golden for us, but I mean, I provoked a horribly strong attack there, which is possibly way more than we could take. This is exactly the situation where you want to use stuff like that, so I'm going to outro this, because this is entirely in the spirit of what I want to say. Mechanoid clusters are horrible threats for your colonies, and most of the time you can get rid of them applying the strategies I'm mentioning here, but sometimes they are just more than your colony can take, and there's never a real shame in abandoning your base because of that, or resettling on a new tile. Because if the amount of centipedes exceeds a certain stress value your defenses can tackle, it's most of the time better to just run and take the fight on another day. But you have to know that for yourself when that moment comes. Until then, there's always the option to just power beam that thing. As you see here, this is a really, really massive attack, and it can annihilate structures like these down here entirely. So Scotty, do your thing, please. So, let's see. We're going to leave our friends down there alone. Lynx revenge is happening all over the place. So, I know this is a waste, but I just want to show you the options you have when you go for a power beam or for the orbital bombardment targeter. It's just important that you know what radius these things have. The orbital bombardment, the orbital laser beam has way less range, has way less spread, whereas this thing here is a very spread attack. So meanwhile, we're getting wrecked by the centipedes. That's just what I expected. But you shouldn't fight centipedes like I do here. But this tutorial was never meant to show you the ideal and best solution. I just want to give you ideas how you solve your situation. You see, orbital bombardment targeters are among the best options that you can use. That's why I wanted to show it as a last measure. So, don't let this happen to you when there's too many mechanoids to tackle. Just run and flee for it. Use EMPs, and maybe you want to watch that other mechanoid tutorial I did a while before, which explains how to deal with these situations. And I hope that was kind of helpful to you guys, because we just destroyed most of the mechanoid clusters here. Of course, there are clusters that are really hard and almost impossible to tackle. And if everything else fails, my personal go-to strategy are always allies, and make sure that you get this problem ruled out by other people. Because immediate military aid is, according to my experiences, the strongest Joker card that you can pick up in every situation, because most of the time it's the most effective way to deal with the mechanoid clusters outside of your base. So if you don't know how to deal with that, acquire a lot of diplomatic standing, and, well, take care of the centipedes. That's all I can say. So I hope that gave you a couple of ideas how to deal with these, and feel free to drop your comments down below. Feel free to leave a like on that video if you found it helpful, and of course subscribe to my channel if you like that type of content. I do daily videos, so there you can find something to grab a hold on. And last but not least, check out the description down there. There's my Twitch channel where I do daily streams. Maybe you find something there you like too. And have a good time. See you soon. Bye-bye.